How much of your upbringing do you think influenced you to become an engineer?
You know, people don't realize everything's made of chemicals. All the stuff comes from somewhere from the ground. When you think about these companies, what do they want to do? They want to be Tesla and the EV game.
Tesla. Everyone wants to be
It's
Tesla. Take me into the boardroom where you're trying to get somebody to give you $100 million.
It's I don't even know how to express it in words is what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
But really.
Well, welcome to XTRAordinary, the most extraordinary podcast in the world.
Thanks, Teague.
Rohit Makharia, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks.
Not many people know the incredible story of Rohit, but he moved here from India when he was 22 and started leading General Motors battery division over an 11-year career there. Moved to GM Ventures and became a partner. And then most recently, you were the president and COO of SES, one of the top lithium metal battery companies in the world. We're going to get to all of that.
Yeah, pretty epic. Most importantly, though, and most recently, he just bought us tacos.
Yeah, he did just buy us tacos.
Yeah, my best accomplishment, you know, out in Austin anyways.
Quickest
You
way to
better
my
put that
heart.
on your resume.
Yeah, quickest way to my
sure.
heart, for sure.
A special interest.
Yeah.
Austin tacos.
For sure. It was great.
So you moved to India, you moved from India when you were 22, right?
Yeah.
But growing up, did you learn to speak English?
Yeah. I went to English school.
Okay.
I grew up in Mumbai, in Bombay, and it's a pretty diverse place. And yeah, my school, we just did everything in English.
Yeah. You're required to take English classes in your school.
Not just English classes, like everything we did was in English. Right?
Oh, really?
So it was like an English medium school. So you go and you study history in English, or just like here.
So it made the transition when you're coming to the US to study a lot smoother than just, day one.
Yeah, it was
trying to
easy.
learn
Actually,
everything.
the transition to Bombay was harder. I call it Bombay because it used to be called Bombay when I grew up. Because I was born in a very, very, very small rural place in India.
How small? How rural?
Okay, I can describe it a few different ways. We didn't have electricity for a long time.
Pretty rural.
So we had a
Rural.
refrigerator in our house, right? It was a nice house, big house. My grandfather was really well to do, but we used to have to run the generator to use, like, to watch TV from 9 to 10 at night. Like, you used to use the generator, or like when we travel someplace, used to go by train, right? But then how do you get to the train station? Horse carriages, and I'm not talking like I'm not talking like English style Victorian horse carriages. I'm talking about like like the one Sven rides in Frozen. It's just kind of
Yeah.
Rough horse carriage.
And I'm not even joking. Like, used to put the luggage on and just sit on the luggage. We used to.
How much of your upbringing do you think influenced you to become an engineer?
Well, the
Seeing that generator and like,
I mean,
what kind of impact did that have?
I was telling Teague about this earlier, but just to finish that earlier thought, the transition from that life where I did not speak English, we did not have an English medium school, everything was in Hindi and English. We used to take English lessons when I was like second grade or third
So
grade.
you started
whatever.
English in second grade.
Yeah, right. So I started speaking English when I came to Bombay. And I remember my first year in Bombay, my mom, so, I flunked every single class because I don't know the language, right? So this is third grade, fourth grade. My mom, who's never spoken English before, literally teaches me English.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because we go through the books, the words, like we pronounce each word. And like by the time that like finished fourth grade, I was almost fluent. And, I was like,
Because you don't
Doing
even
well in
have an
school.
English, you don't even have an Indian accent.
Great. Yeah, crush it.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know how. I lost that over the years here. But to answer your question, the engineering thing, it just happened like over time, really. And I remember when I was 14 or so, and my dad was like, "Hey, Rohit, you got to come and join a family business when you grow up." And so the idea was like you go to college, but you also come to work on the weekends. It was a thing. And all my cousins always did that. And even till date, all of my extended family runs their own business.
What was the family business?
Textiles. You make
wow.
you make the yarn. We had a loom factory,
Oh, cool.
and then you sell saris, which is kind of like the traditional wear for Indian women. And I just wasn't into that. But my dad asked me, and I'm like, yeah, I want to be a chemical engineer. And he's like, wait, what?
When you were how
And
old?
This is about 13, 14, somewhere in there. I remember.
You wanted to be a chemical engineer since you were 13 years old.
this was intuitive. Like, and I think this was also kind of funny because this was the first time I think I started to study chemistry, right? And I somehow realized, which you and Ernie were talking about in one of your podcasts, which is, people don't realize you're just sitting on a chair. Like, how did this chair come here? Like, somebody made this thing, and how's this made? It's made of material. Everything's made of chemicals. We are made of chemicals, everything in the world. And I'm like, and we make all kinds of stuff with chemicals. That's not going anywhere. And so I'm like, I think I'm going to do that, Dad. And that was kind of like my intuitive response, just because maybe I just had a chemistry class or whatever. But somehow that stuck with me. And in fact, not too long ago, I even wrote a blog about what you and Ernie were talking about, which is like, where does stuff come from? All the stuff comes from somewhere from the ground.
Yeah.
Lithium is just one example of what you guys are working on, Teague, but everything in the world comes from somewhere, and it's mostly from our ground, trees, animals, animals get their, everything's from the ground, nutrition's, from the ground up, etc. So that just stuck with me over time. And I, followed that thread, and I'm a chemical engineer.
It's such a fascinating thing to think about. There's this saying in mining that if it doesn't grow on a tree like food, it comes out of the ground.
True.
This microphone, our phones, like the watch, like maybe clothes, can come from cotton and things like that that's grown, but like people don't think about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Even a lot of clothing these days comes from the ground. Like, all of this has latex, and, you just stretched your t-shirt. That stretch is not cotton,
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And a lot of the other thing is that a lot of the really big companies that make the base materials, people don't know them.
Yeah.
I mean, there are
all behind the scenes.
Yeah.
all behind the scenes.
Oh yeah. There's so many big billions, $100 of billion worth of companies that no one's ever heard of, because they just work in the background that makes all this other stuff.
Not about the brand. Yeah.
One of our biggest investors at EnergyX is this company, this Korean company. It's a big steel and materials company called POSCO.
Good company.
And when I tell people about POSCO, they think I'm talking about Costco.
Costco.
Yeah.
Free samples. Free samples.
Free samples.
Free samples
Yeah,
at
free samples.
Costco.
Also a great company.
Yeah. Costco's also a great company. But this company, POSCO, is the 4th largest steel maker in the world. And they do $70 billion in revenue a year. And nobody's ever heard of them.
Yeah.
And
They sound like just a knockoff Costco.
Yeah. And it's like the underbelly of the world, that all these companies that make all the things that we use every day that nobody even knows about.
We're so disconnected from it because this looks a lot like different, as a pillow.
Yeah.
So
It's like it's too, people just see the surface of the thing that they buy. They don't see the supply chain that it takes to create that. Like, one company might have assembled this microphone, but this comes from dozens, maybe hundreds of companies, from this material on the top
For sure.
to,
For sure.
the electric wiring.
Yeah. Just think about, I was just thinking about that. Just think about the copper wire that's just linking here, right? I mean, just getting that copper into this microphone must have exchanged hands like 20 times.
Yeah.
All the way from, you think about just mining that copper, and then now this copper is here assembled into this other piece, coated by a shield, coated by like this another plastic shield. And before that, of course, the copper has to be like, molded, like transformed from this rock into a wire. Like,
so many different degrees.
Yeah.
And then before that, it was literally just an idea in a human's head to do this. So it turned from an idea to this, to that, to everything in order for it to get to there.
So when the copper comes out of the ground as rock, it goes through a chemical process, or like a heap leaching process, which is chemical engineering. And you've known that you want to do this since you were 13 years old.
Intuitively. I just that was the answer I gave my dad, and I remember that really like succinctly. And all these years after, it's just stuck with, still like resonates with me. I think it was like an aha moment, probably, in my when I was a kid. I didn't even know that. And really, I got that aha moment only like 4 or 5 years ago. I realized, my goodness, like this all just is coming together, and has been coming together for this long for myself. Yeah.
So I want to go through, your amazing career, but I want to start at the end with your most recent company where you were president and COO of SES, which stands for Solid Energy Systems, I think.
Yes, that's how it started out. But we rebranded to SES because we're not doing solid energy anymore. We're doing something different called hybrid, which is a mix of solid and liquid. But yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
But SES is essentially one of the leaders in lithium metal batteries, which are the next generation of lithium ion batteries that can hold more charge, have more energy density, which basically equates to longer cell phone life or longer range in cars.
Yep.
Tell me about the company.
Yeah. I would say it is the leader, not just the leading company in lithium metal. In fact, lithium metal, like you described, is sort of the next step up when it comes to batteries. Everyone understands that when you have a lithium-ion batteries, this lithium still needs to go into these different particles when it's shuttling back and forth when you're using your battery and charging it, right? There's all this empty space inside your battery where the lithium has to just go and rust. Lithium metal, on the other hand, is just kind of just lithium, just metal, a thin foil, and it just kind of lithium just goes off the surface, comes back on the surface when you charge and discharge the battery. And so lithium metal is at the limit of lithium ion. How can you do any better than just using pure metal? And so that's why a lot of people have a lot of interest in this, have had it for 80 years. This is not something new. This idea was discovered about 80 years ago, and really it gives you better range, more talk time on your phone, more power for your leaf blower, what have you, right? It'll be like half the size, in terms of volume. It'll be half the weight.
Nice.
And so, of course, that just means...
So are we using these in cars today?
People have not started yet using this car today because no real battery that can be put in the car that is lithium metal has yet been made.
Okay.
And why is that?
SES is the only company that has made batteries that can be put into cars. So SES, when we were there, we had announced that SES was working with GM, Hyundai, and Honda to do that development work to put that in the car, right?
Working with some of the biggest car companies,
right? And the difficulty there is there's just so many of them. It's why is it not in the car? Because nobody until SES had figured out how to make these batteries at scale. Nobody had, and by scale I mean not just kind of volume, how many can you make them at a time, but more most batteries that people sort of research or develop are these tiny batteries, right? Yeah. But then in a car, you need a battery that is
massive
But
sometimes.
and stringing a lot of batteries together, but the cells still have to be of adequate size.
Yes, and adequate energy. And so with lithium metal, without going into the details, that has been the holy grail for a very, very long time. Also, life and safety and all of these things are being worked on. And these should be in cars soon, definitely before the end of this decade.
So you think that, that was my next question. When will these next generation batteries go into cars that people can buy?
Oh, soon. The SES, like I said, is I think at the forefront of all of this. I'm not at SES anymore, so I can't speak to their plans. But I know that these car makers really want to fast track giving their customers what they want, right? You want to buy a car that doesn't cost $100,000,
right.
EV, right?
So it'll bring the cost of everything down too. Is that the idea?
Cost will come down, because you can put half the battery to get the same range if you want, right? So if you have a car today that goes 300 miles and you're happy with that, right? You can put half the materials, half the lithium, right? Lithium is a different example because it is lithium metal, but half the separator, half of all the other materials, and all of a sudden
the battery will cost half the amount to go the same distance. But on the flip side, you can pay the same amount to go double the distance.
Right.
Which is a big incentive.
Right.
And how much of the car's price is equated to the battery? Because if you just reduce a little bit of, I mean, is that a big factor?
Big factor. In fact, a lot of people would argue that the electric vehicles are batteries, with a skin on top.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
In terms of cost and also just the way you make them.
That's actually really
There's a lot of battery
that I really don't know the answer to, and I'd be curious. I know that it's all different, but is there an average of? Do you know the average on how much percentage of a car the battery is? Like
we can do some simple math, right? Even like in the battery world, you equate math by how many dollars you pay for energy, right?
Right.
So energy is kilowatt hour. That's kind of like one of the units that we discuss in the battery that we use in the battery industry. So assume like a Tesla that has 100 kilowatt hour battery, like a really good one, long range one, right? And the battery cost is roughly $125 per kilowatt hour, $150 depending on where you are and who you're buying from.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do the math, up to 15
$150 a kilowatt hour.
$150 per kilowatt hour is kind of like the high end. $125 per kilowatt hour up until very recently was the low end. Now it's getting to $100 per kilowatt hour, right? So even if you take the low end, $100 per kilowatt hour, you're still talking about the whole battery itself.
Wait, those numbers don't add up though.
$150 per kilowatt times 100. So
if a battery is only a
battery.
100 kilowatt hour battery, 100 times 150.
$15,000 battery.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like,
expensive battery.
Your car, like if you're trying to sell a car to a family that wants to afford, say, $25,000 on a car, $30,000 on a car.
Yeah.
Right.
And the battery
$10,000 to $15,000 of that car is going to just be the battery. Your engine, on the other hand, is about $3,000.
Yeah, that's very expensive.
Wow. Okay.
No, $4,000.
So
also you need to mark it up because you need to be able to sustain production. So it's like there has to be a room for a solid markup in there as well. And it's an expensive battery. Given some cars cost $15,000.
Yes. And this is why many car makers, have had struggle with selling electric vehicles to mass market, because all you can do is if you want to, and some car makers have tried doing that. They've lost money on cars they sell on the EVs in the past, not now. But, and that's why when you go to buy an EV, even today, even a Model Y is like $50,000, $60,000, $60,000, right? To begin with. And so that the nice thing is that the costs have been coming down. It has come down significantly. And even lithium ion, forget lithium metal for a second, is continuously it's going to get better.
It boils down to the cost per kilowatt hour.
Yes.
And that's come down dramatically.
Yes. And that's going to happen.
So
even more so.
What's your view on the landscape of electric vehicle companies, right? We obviously have Tesla out here in Austin. Probably, definitely one of the leaders. I guess BYD just surpassed them in number of cars.
Right.
Sold per month. Yeah, BYD is Chinese. But then you have, American car companies like Ford and GM. You have Volkswagen. One, just from a high level, what's your view on the EV transition? And two, do you think that the traditional US based EV companies are kind of slacking behind?
Well, there's so many different ways to answer this question. When we just look in the industry, right? Just look at EVs. It is true. I can say that it's true. It's certain that, in the future, most cars will be EVs. Most new cars that are sold will be EVs, right? So that transition is happening. Every single car company in the world has to make that transition over time. The difficult questions always like when and how, and those are the dirty details. That nobody really has a crystal ball. Okay, people can like suspect. Like I have my own perspective on that, but I've been proven wrong too. Like even this last year, a lot of car companies that put a lot of EVs out there didn't sell much. Okay, this went back to many issues. But then on the other hand, you also have in the same exact moment in time, a company like BYD that's going gangbusters selling electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
They're selling a ton. Their stock prices off the roof. And so there's definitely this dichotomy of like companies, right? In the US, we have Tesla. In China, they have BYD, even others, really. So there's this dichotomy where in the same moment in time, somehow the EV transition's happening rapidly, but it's also not happening at all, or it's slowing down. And and the EV stock, a bunch of the car companies, EV in particular, the stocks are getting hammered. Battery companies, there's new battery companies, next gen battery companies, their stocks are suffering. How's this possible? How's this possible? So there's just the transition's happening. It's not about whether or not the transition is happening. It's not even about whether the transition is happening fast or slow, but it's really about how do you go about making that transition? Who's been making the right decisions? Who is looking at EV just from a fresh angle, fresh pair of eyes, and just taking advantage of those, all of this newness, which is like, when you think about these EV companies, why are all of a sudden there's so many EV companies? Why? Like, back when Ford's, rolled out Model Ts, it was the same way. There were so many car companies. If you look
Were there
at
a lot of car companies?
a lot of car
Ford
companies,
rolled out
lots
the
of
Model
startups,
T?
hundreds. Which over time got consolidated, went out of business. It was the exact 100 years ago was very, very similar in the car history of cars and cars, coming to market, like it's with EVs today, right? And when you think about EVs, the barrier to entry is actually so much less than what it was for what's been
Back in the
all
day.
these decades for like traditional cars, right? The supply chain has been like locked in.
Yeah.
All this engineering is like tacit knowledge that's kind of like stays within a company. It's really hard to go and design an engine like a Corvette, and for
Whereas it's
GM that
open
can go
source
so
now. It's
fast.
like-
But these days, if you're an EV company, you can buy a battery, string it together, and you can make a nice car.
Yeah.
And you don't have to rely on any of the supply chain that's out there.
Probably a lot of marketing too. It's like people don't want something that they don't know about, and also if they think it sucks because other people don't like it.
Yeah, how do you market it? How do you sell it to consumers? All of those things matter, right?
Yeah.
So there are car companies that are going to do it well. There are car companies that are not doing it well. And I think what's going to happen is that you're going to see a lot of new companies that break out, that you didn't know. BYD was not a car company. BYD was a battery company when it first got going.
And then they vertically
They up-leveled.
integrated.
They're vertically integrated into building cars, right?
Interesting.
So I think I think for a while there'll be a lot more companies, and for a while there'll be a lot more failures. But the trajectory of growth, the trajectory of transition, is going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Stay the course.
I want to get into your time at GM. You obviously have a lot of valuable insights there. But first, I want to just finish up on SES. So you were the president of SES for a couple of years.
3 years, yeah.
3 years. And while you were there, you helped the company raise $600 million.
A little under, yeah.
A little under? Okay. We'll round up.
Over 5 at that point.
I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Spence is an entrepreneur. You're trying to raise money for your startup.
Yeah,
Raising
right
money
now.
is hard.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to do if you don't have a successful exit behind yourself. So what sort of things or challenges did you face, and how involved were you in the raising process when it comes to over $500 million?
Yeah. So I was really involved. The way we raised money after I joined the company was 2 different ways. One, we raised about, maybe a half of it, a little less than half of it from our partners, General Motors, Hyundai, Honda, and the rest we raised from institutional investors as we were going to get listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, so you took the company public,
right?
During your time.
Yeah. This was through SPAC. A great sponsor, Robert Friedland. Anyone in the mining industry knows him, and he was a great supporter of us. But I for a lot of this, to be honest, I won't even take the credit. Like, especially like raising money from our partners, our customers, that was in the making for 5 years, if not more, right? These things don't happen overnight. So before I joined the company, I was on the board of the company for a long time. When GM Ventures had made the investment as part of that team, I joined the board. And these partners, Yeah, some of them were newer, and some of them, the company had a long relationship with, like GM, when we made the investment, in 2015, for example. And over time, like GM had been supported financially. But really, what makes or breaks it is like that the company itself was making progress.
Yeah.
And it had been working with these customers day in and day out. All that sweat, all that like sweat equity eventually transitioned to real equity.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's how you raise money. There's just no shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I joined the company. We raised a few different rounds privately. Yeah, we took the company public, but it's all of this sweat equity that the team had built up already with these partners. And on the institutional side,
I mean, these were big checks from partners.
yeah, for example, what they disclosed with GM, it was about 100 million, 15 investment, 15 development. So there's just like big checks. Yeah, they were like
and Hyundai and Honda.
Hyundai and Honda came at a similar level. Yeah. So
I mean, those are big institutions. I mean, were those fierce negotiations? Like,
oh yeah,
what's it like? Take me into the boardroom where you're trying to get somebody to give you $100 million.
Yeah, it's I don't even know how to express it in words. Is what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
But really, in some ways it's actually really simple. In some ways, it's the hardest thing to do. Everyone, by the time you get to that point, right? Everyone actually wants to do the deal.
Yeah.
No one's sitting around the table to walk away.
Right.
Right. So yeah, you're negotiating hard, but that's not the hard part. The negotiating part is just negotiating. You negotiate, you sign the line, you kumbaya, and just move on, and everyone's happy, right? But leading up to it, I think if I was talking to entrepreneurs and try to help them with the story, what I would say is a few things. One, a lot of like founders and CEOs that I work with always kind of like focus on working with the top level management, right? You got to talk to the CEO. You have to talk to like the VP of whatever division in a big company, which is all true. You should do that. But you should also equally respect the engineers that you're working with, the scientists that you're working with, the people, the admin that you interact with, right? Who's setting up your meeting, like, and build relationships throughout the organization, like at all levels, and just be a respectful partner, and be a good partner. So that's that's something tangible I think that people can do as they try to get big checks from company, because you have to do all these things consistently for many years to get to that point.
Right.
The second piece is all companies want to get to, all the companies that invest those kind of checks, especially into a startup that's high risk, are not doing for just money.
Right. Strategic.
Like, it is so important. It is so important to show them what you can give them potentially, if you're successful, is going to be so much bigger than
the risk.
than the risk and the loss that they would occur if they didn't do this do this deal, right? So it really helps, and not everyone in this position is in the position to do this, but it really helps if what you're offering is a step function change, not just for them, but for the industry. And when you think about these companies in the US, Tesla is definitely number one, right? A lot of these incumbent car companies, what do they want to do? They want to come and say this out loud, but they want to beat Tesla in the EV game.
Tesla. Everyone wants to beat Tesla.
And so how do you beat Tesla in the EV game? They've been trying to make EVs, right? They're getting better at it. It looks pretty good, but still not selling. They're not selling a lot. Why? Tesla's selling expensive cars too, right? So they feel like there's no way out for them to go and be a Tesla, because they're not a Tesla. GM is a GM, or Honda is a Honda. They have all this legacy and history and tradition, right? So for them, they have to rely on technology. If you can offer a step function change, which just enables them to leapfrog Tesla in a different dimension, now that's attractive.
Right.
Okay. I can be a Tesla like how I go to market, but I can be better than Tesla like if I can give a car that's like $20,000
1,000-mile range Hummer.
Think about that.
Yeah.
And at a cost that somebody could actually go, like somebody who construction worker can go and buy a truck that is like 40 grand, for example, that is an EV that goes, say, 600 miles, or you can power it all day to run your tools, no problem. You won't be stuck someplace on a job site. That's very valuable, right?
Yeah.
So you can't beat Tesla at its own game. So you have to come at it from a different angle. So that was helpful because lithium metal is that step function, is the limit of lithium ion in many ways.
I mean, not many people get in their whole life the opportunity to be in a room where you're asking for $100 million check, right? Like that has to be a surreal moment. And then walk me through taking the company public, because that's also not something many people get to experience.
Yeah, that was special. And all of this was special for me because I had spent all my time at GM. And then even as an investor, a venture capitalist, I was always on the other side of the table, on the deal. But this whole experience was very, very special to me just because I learned a lot from it. Taking the company public was just kind of like, it felt like you were just a dirty rag in a washing machine, just in a spin cycle.
What does that mean?
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
What does that mean?
It just means that you were just pushed around like all over the place.
Who's pushing you around?
It's everyone involved, like your sponsors, your bankers, the investors. Like there are 20, you're doing 20 meetings a day. There are questions coming in.
That's after you're public or the
before
transition becoming
to become public, right?
Become public.
And every investor, is asking a different kind of question. You're responding to all of these different investors. Your bankers are throwing different ideas at you. Different investors have different ideas of what the deal should look like. And then just the grind of, it's really what I was referring to is just the grind of like 6 months of straight like meetings after meetings after meetings, right?
Yeah,
with investors. That was really a grind. But also what it helped us do was helped me for sure was really understand our story and be able to tell our story in a way that would resonate with the world, not just the investors, right? Because once you go public, the retail, the next guy needs to also believe in your story.
Right.
Your neighbor needs to believe in your story.
True.
And that really helped a lot. Just kind of like going through that process. And then it was exciting. It was just exciting to finally go and ring that bell.
Yeah.
It was really exciting to do that. It was just like a fun moment.
Cool.
And for me, and of course for the team and the CEO in particular, who's also the founder, who had been at it since 2012. And I had been involved in the company since 2015. It was just, that it's one of those moments in time that you will remember, and it's just so, it's just such a great kind of like transition point for the company, because now you're like a different kind of a company, and for good or bad, but it was a lot of fun.
Sometimes bad.
Yeah. As a private company, you don't have to talk quarterly about what you did. I'll tell you, in battery industry, almost nothing happens quarterly.
Tell me about it.
Right.
These are years long research and development, small incremental.
And even when you're trying to commercialize as SES is, or any other battery company is, 3 months, sometimes a test doesn't even finish running in 3 months. Like a cycle life test that you run batteries can take many, many more months than that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's go back to the part of your career right before that. I know we're kind of doing things in reverse, but you said the way that you got involved with SES was you were a partner at GM Ventures, which is General Motors' venture arm, which is cool in and of itself. And I'm really interested in the whole spectrum of investments that you were making. But you invested in SES as a partner at GM and then joined its board. What was it like being on the other side of the table, being the investor, and getting tons of different opportunities and companies coming across your desk? Like,
yeah, it lights me up because that was, that was the most fun I've had.
Cool.
And I've had a lot of fun. Like, I can't think of a single time in my career where like I had not had fun, right? It's been a really, really good journey for me. I'm just so appreciative of that. But the venture capital piece was the most fun I had. And the reason why is not because I was getting to write checks or what have you, but but it just opened up my eyes. Like the world became so much bigger, so much bigger. I didn't know about startups until like, 2010, which is like what, 14 years ago? I didn't even know the word startup in any way. I came from India. I went to school. I joined a big company because that's what people in India do. And, you want to do good by yourself and by in the company that you work with. But once I got an opportunity to work with startup, this is before I was at GM Ventures, I was just fascinated by startups, the idea of startups, the idea that you can build something out of nothing, the idea, and even knowing that all of a sudden it was like a shock. Oh my God, like a big chunk of the population in the world, and certainly in the US, is employed by small and medium businesses, like, including startups. And the other thing I love to do is learn. I just love learning. Anything and everything. Anything and everything. And when you become a VC at something like General Motors, you can learn about anything that you want. Why? Because automotive touches every single part of the economy.
Yeah.
Every single part.
True.
When you think about like metals, right? All the way from like materials, all the way like, clean engines, clean energy. It touches things like advanced manufacturing, like, it touches things like financial, like, GM and car industry, they loan out billions of dollars a year through their finance arms, right?
Right. Insurance.
It touches insurance, right?
Electronics, like the TV, like electronics.
Robotics, like, think about autonomous vehicles, think about AI, cybersecurity, how do you move people around here and around the world? Like, how do you move people in India might be very different than how you move people around here in Austin, you know? And so you could wake up in the morning and you could say to yourself, this is something like autonomous vehicles. I had no idea about what autonomous vehicles, right? When I joined GM Ventures, I want to learn about autonomous vehicles. And you can spend a year learning about it. How? What's the best way to learn about it?
You can talk to the people that are...
Talk to the people, right? And then when you're in that position, you're privileged enough that you can call a CEO who's serious, like in the autonomous vehicle space, be it sensors, chips, be it AI stack, software, whatever, right?
Yeah. So,
and more than likely they'll talk to you, right? And then you learn. And then once you've talked to, say, 10 different like sensor companies that do LiDARs, like laser, like, imaging, you will have a pretty good point of view. You should have a point of view.
Yeah.
And you can invest in your favorite one.
And then you can make, and then
just write him a $10 million check.
Yeah, there you go.
And then you can make a case to invest in one, right? Which I did.
We
did end up investing. Like, I ended up investing in like a LiDAR company, like sensor companies, autonomous driving, like artificial intelligence companies, cybersecurity companies, fintech company. I invested in new materials, batteries, of course.
How many of your investments were inbound, like people reaching out to you and sending you a deck, versus you going out and exploring what you like and then sending an offer that you want to be included? What was that like?
It's different for different people, but for me, it was the latter. I love being out and about. Why? Because I love meeting people. I love being with people, and venture capital, at the end of the day, ends up being a people's business.
Yeah.
It's a relationship business. And, somebody had told me not too long ago, like, hey, Rohit, when you're doing VC, you were everywhere. Like, everyone knew you were everywhere. And I loved it. So inbound too, like, because you're General Motors, you do get inbound from all different kind of angles. But for me, that was the smaller chunk of my sourcing. My sourcing mostly came from other VCs that I'd worked with, other CEOs that I met, either randomly or because I reached out, or I met them at a conference, or I was at a small gathering where the best minds had been invited to talk about a certain topic. A lot of different ways.
I like that you said earlier that you always enjoy learning, right? And that's like the whole purpose of this show, XTRAordinary, is we want to learn from people that make their own rules. That's kind of something you've done. You mentioned that having the title partner at GM opened a lot of doors for you. You told me a pretty cool story when we were talking, and he got to interview the CEO, or not interview, but like he was with the CEO of NVIDIA.
epic.
which is now a $2 trillion company.
Crushing it. Blew up.
You need to retell that story. That was one of the coolest stories you told me.
Yeah, that was, again, and I'm not even sure if Jensen will remember this because, there were so many investors in the room. But the one thing I realized, when I came to this country, the one thing I realized quickly is you don't have to take permissions for a lot of things. And most people like sort of the permissionless innovation, or just not asking the permission to necessarily be someplace, takes you a long way. And this story was along those lines. I was learning about AI. This must have been 2015 or so, 7, 8, 9 years ago, when NVIDIA stock was nothing like it is today, right? They had just started to put the GPUs out there. They just started to, their developer community had just started to pick up, and you could hear in the VC circles that, GPU, a lot of companies that work on AI, even the earlier version of AIs, not like the LLMs right now, had started to use GPUs. And I was really interested in just learning about what this was. And, back in my earlier days as well, on the side, I used to code just for fun. I'd taken a year break between college and pretty much did computer engineering for a year. So I sort of had an idea of what I was getting into. So I was there for that reason. And then all of a sudden, I see a sign, somebody's holding, investors that way. I'm an investor, sure, I'll go that way, right? But then when I got there, it was an investor. It was like a shareholder meeting. People who had invested, were like institutional investors in NVIDIA.
Nice.
Had to be there, right? I didn't know that, but I'm like, I'd love to hear Jensen talk about this because I've come to learn. And Jensen's not going to talk outside of this room. I'd love to go and
investor crashing.
Yeah, pretty much. And they're like, yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Glad you asked.
Oh, you're an investor from GM?
Yeah.
Come on.
Sure.
They said, glad you asked. And so I went in there and, he did his spiel. Basically, he went through his investor day. And then, I got to talk to him, ask some questions. And then I, and I walked away thinking that this is going to be a great company. And I would have never imagined they'd be this successful.
Yeah.
But that Jensen just came across as a very humble, a very a guy who just really believed in what he was doing. Also,
talk about how successful NVIDIA has been because they sell the thing that powers AI, right? Obviously now NVIDIA is a household name,
right?
For most, still not for all, because it's not like you can go buy an NVIDIA chip,
right? It's really hard to get, even if you're in the business.
Yeah. Even if you're in the business,
also really expensive.
But
their margins are
NVIDIA chips are basically what powers OpenAI and Microsoft's AI, which obviously Microsoft now is powered by OpenAI, but how do you think that AI is going to change the automobile industry?
Oh boy, that's a whole nother thing. Have you guys looked at any of the videos from Tesla's FSD 12, the full self-driving 12 that that it's in beta testing right now?
I've heard that they're testing it now.
Yeah, so people have started to put videos out of that about a month ago. And this is about the same time that OpenAI released Sora. Sora is the text to video, right? So you can type drive me through a jungle in a Hummer, and it'll have that video right there, and on the fly you can say, oh well, take me to the beaches of Brazil instead, and so they'll immediately change the scene, right? So what they're doing is on the fly, this hallucination of AI can render reality, right?
That's wild just to think about.
Right. And that's what Tesla is kind of doing with FSD 12. And this is different. And not a lot of people realize this. This is different than Tesla has done anything before in their autonomous vehicles. Okay. What this car is doing now is that it's kind of hallucinating by the second. So if you're driving, you got a scene, how do you describe a scene to a computer? You'll be there's 12 chairs here, 2 couches, 2 people. AI does none of that, right? But what it is able to do is it looks at the scene and it can tell you what the scene's going to look like in the next moment and the next moment after. So if you let it just hallucinate for what the scene's going to look like in 1 hour, it's going to be totally wrong, right?
Right.
but it can keep predicting the next few moments. And that's what it's building it on the fly. And when they started training it, they didn't even tell the software that it's a 3D world. The software taught itself it's a 3D world. They didn't tell that's a stop sign. It eventually figured out what's a stop sign. In fact, you'll see some videos online where they did not teach it how to make a U-turn, or what we call a Michigan left, where you can't make a left, you got to go straight, turn around. The car taught this
Just
to
does
itself.
Wow.
Okay. All of this is new, brand new. This is one of the ways AI is going to change the automotive industry, but this is might be one of the most profound ones.
Yeah,
the other ones, and this is going to touch every single part of the car. And it's hard to imagine right now. And this is a really interesting topic to me because, again, I've been studying it. But you think about Apple CarPlay, Siri, all of that is going to move towards a different kind of a training and model. When you think about, let's talk about something totally different. How battery research is done, how new materials are being discovered that power these batteries, that power these electric cars.
Like machine learning or
there's
like
going to
large data
there
models.
are already companies that have been founded, have been working on it now, and are going to definitely transition to the large language model kind of training, unsupervised, to go and discover new materials much faster, and not just in cars, in all walks of life. Every single part of the car and its experience with the customer is going to get affected by it.
So I want to kind of go back to FSD12 for a second. Does that mean that everything that was done in the past is kind of like scrapped and they're just going with this new generative AI thing? And
that's my understanding. That's my understanding. That's
Wow.
what they did. They basically, of course, there's a lot, on the hardware side and how they set up the compute, et cetera, all that learning they take forward. But effectively, it's a redo over the last 18 months.
And what are companies like Ford and GM doing to even stay remotely close to something like Tesla?
I don't know. And this is where I would say that anyone who is in that industry that is not pivoting hard, like yesterday, is already 18 months and too late. And the other thing is, in that world, 6 months is a decade.
Yeah.
True.
This is really for people to wrap their mind around. Every 6 months is going to be a decade.
And when it comes to full self-driving, though, do you think the public is going to be quick to adopt that, even though the technology might be there? What about the cultural impact? Are people going to be okay with jumping in a full self-driving car? What do you think about that?
Yes,
You see these people driving around with Apple Vision Pros in their Cybertrucks.
You can see that video online today. People with their Apple Vision
So
Pro.
there's some people.
I did see a video of girls getting in a full self-driving, basically Uber competitor.
Yeah.
Which just shows up.
That's a good
no
question,
one's in the
though. There's
driver's
So that's
how are we going to trust that?
That's what I mean. I think they're going to be both, right? For a while. There'll be a lot of people who are going to be really excited about it and keep doing it. And there's going to be a huge swath of people who are going to be really skeptical about it, right?
I think one way to do it is a deciding factor for people is if you bring the price of that down. So a car ride to the airport is literally $5 as opposed to $85 or
That'd be very
$100 or
helpful.
$150. It's like, all right, I'll try this out.
Dude, price is king.
That'd be very helpful. That'd be very helpful, right?
That's
and
just ultimately the reason they're trying to do it, right? Lower the cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I think, again, his strategy, Elon Musk, his strategy is really impressive because he got rid of every other sensor in the car but the cameras, right? And these sensors make up a lot of the cost of the vehicle. So when you look at a Waymo and when you look at Cruise, they still have multiple LiDARs, multiple radars.
They have cameras too, though, right?
Oh yeah, cameras for sure. And then Musk even got rid of the ultrasonic sensors, which is dirt cheap. But his vision's different. His vision, I think, which and I'm no Musk fanboy, by the way. I know you are. And and for me, it's kind of he's a good guy, and he's a great engineer, and I love him for that and for everything he's doing. But it's not I go on to Twitter and spend half my time following what he says.
But what's interesting is so we're talking about Tesla versus say Ford and GM. Tesla started building every single car that they have with 3D, not the cameras aren't 3D, but they have cameras around the whole thing. Something like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So that now as software gets better and boom, all of a sudden you have generative AI.
Got all this data.
Every single car can have that software implemented into it. Why doesn't GM build every single car with cameras around it? Like,
you'll be surprised. Actually, they do. Like,
They do?
Yeah. Like, but
just like one backup camera.
No. There's like, for example, my wife's been driving this SUV, and even one before that. You can get the full 360 top view of where the car is in the environment when you say backing out, right? Not just backup, right? And that happens all the time. Like it's that part is easy. That part is not hard, and companies have been doing it all the time. Again, Tesla came at this from a totally different angle. What they said is that I'm gonna record all the time.
Right. So now they have millions or billions of hours.
And there's automatic opt-in. You can opt out. Like, sometimes like I'll go through phases in my life where I'm gonna opt out. Like, but but again, I actually have opted back in because I like the idea of just
of that record,
making it better, right?
Making it
just
better
like many other people. But what they did is like, I'm gonna record all the time. You automatic opt-in, and I'm gonna have the software in the car, the hardware in the car, like the chipset, the compute, to be able to do that. Like that costs money, right? So as Tesla goes up market, right? GM and Ford and every other car maker in the world has the DNA to go down market.
Right.
They want to make their cars cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, which of course eventually everyone, even Tesla, is trying to do, right? But when you want to go and build something new,
build a great product.
When you're recording all the time, doing computation on the fly all the time, and then have the vision to use all of this data to continuously train your AI models. I mean, all of this kind of like the cameras it's not the cameras is easy.
Yeah.
You can put cameras all over. It's like, how do you build everything around it, all your infrastructure and the car itself and your teams, and kind of like how do you build the infrastructure and the DNA of the company to just continuously use that information to make it better.
Improve.
That is different.
Yeah. So different.
Great point.
It's such a different mindset than anything that other car companies are thinking about. And I think it's reflected in the Tesla stock price. Like Tesla isn't a car company. They're an energy technology company. And then now
it's also a brand, right?
An artificial intelligence energy technology company.
It's incredible.
Right? Yeah. It is.
I heard you're going to be able to send out your full self-driving Tesla to be an Uber for you and earn income.
Yeah.
So if you own a full self-driving Tesla, you could send it out, and at 50% capacity, it's going to make like 30 to 50 grand a year for you.
That's how you get those $5 trips to the airport.
Exactly. Right? And regardless of the hardware cost, there's going to be a certain point where that breaks even, and then you're just earning. Right.
Musk has been promising that for quite some time. So there's a healthy amount of skepticism to that idea from people who've been in the industry in particular. But to his credit, I truly believe that this FSD 12 release, that he's actually putting it out there, and this complete pivot to generative AI. I don't know if we'll get to that point what you just mentioned, but it's definitely a step function change. It's definitely like, it's 10x better than anything they've done before in the last 10 years for self-driving.
The point is that, you said earlier that 10 years is like 6 months. But with generative AI, 10 years is 6 months, but then the next three, then it's 5 months, then it's 4 months, then it's 2 months, then it's 1 month.
That's what exponential curves look like, right? And at some point, maybe it'll fall off the exponential curve.
Hit the point of singularity.
But the other, that's just like one thing, right? But this generative AI is touching every single part of the economy. It really is. Like, just the other, what I did when I just for the fun of it, I came across this AI company, Lucite, and when you and I first got in touch, I'm like, I'm going to use this app to just figure out what EnergyX is doing. So I went to their app, we just put in your website, energyx.com, and out comes a big banker deck.
Sweet. Can you share it
Cool.
with me?
Send it over.
Sure, yeah.
Lose
Yeah,
sight.
you can go like online right now, do it right now. Like,
Okay.
you'll get it on your phone in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But the point is, that's such a obtuse example. But the point is, every single part of the economy where people, the smartest people who think ahead, way ahead of the game, are already applying this
Right.
to every single part of the economy.
So I want to wrap up on not this, but this section of your career as a partner at GM Ventures. What were the 5 kind of highlight investments, the 5 investments that you were most excited about during that time?
Yeah, so I made 10 investments in total in that time.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
yeah. So I
Over
7 years.
Okay.
Right. And SES obviously is my favorite. Heck, I joined that company.
Right.
Jump
I love
ship. Get
GM.
on board.
And there are quite a few others I like. I love a company called Nauto, Nauto. That's in the Bay Area. And
What do they do?
in fact, so they're one of those companies that bring together, some companies are like hardware companies, some companies are software companies, some companies are data companies. They bring the 3 together. So what they do is, like, for all these commercial trucks and fleets, they install a camera because they don't come fitted with camera.
Right.
They're recording all the time, just like we talked earlier.
Like recording the driver or recording or
both ways.
both ways.
Both
Okay.
ways. And then for every, I think, anyways, I don't know if I can mention this, but for a lot of the data that they record, they only actually store and send it through the cloud, like a sliver of that data, right? Because what they can do is they use artificial intelligence on board to understand what's important.
Cool.
And now think about this, right? All these cameras are recording all the time. And if you can just kind of like, if you can just kind of like just pick out what is actually important,
data.
great. And then they take that a step further. Then they provide insights to their fleet managers. Then they can build maps on the fly, like high definition maps on the fly eventually. Like, there's so many different applications that can come out of this work. But combining data, having the proprietary software to collect that data, having software on board and on the cloud, kind of like to really just collect data that's important, then train the AI model on the important data set, and then apply that back with insights. I think that's a great model. And I love Stefan. He's a great CEO. I just love him as a CEO. He's obviously he's building this amazing company.
Cool.
The other company that I really like, which is like a whole nother track, is Spring Labs. This company is based out in LA.
Okay.
And this company, they're in the cybersecurity space. What they do is, when you go and open a credit card or get an auto loan or what have you, right? You have to put in all your info and all that, right?
Yeah.
And all of this goes to a bunch of different vendors along the chain, right? And everyone has your personal important information, right? PII, which legally, like, they have to protect a certain way, they can't share it, etc. But everyone's got it. So what this company does is that they're building this data sharing platform using blockchain. They started out with blockchain and they've added on to that, where you can share data with me, I can share data with Teague can share data with you, Spence. But so you'll see the insight and the information from the data, but you won't get the data itself.
Love
it's
that.
kind of like the data actually is hidden, but you will know that my credit score is A-okay, and I'm in the top tier for this kind of loan. And Teague's data will confirm that to you because he shared that data with you too. And all of this keeps building over time, right? And so they're again.
And you can't cheat that. It's on the blockchain.
Right. And it's
blockchain?
invisible, but it's in a way on the blockchain or different methods that they have. It's invisible to all parties, the actual data.
I'm curious to I wonder if they would be able to implement that with voting somehow, because
That's so true.
I understand the risk of making voting digital, but at the same time, me as an American voter, I just feel like, how do I know my vote actually counted, and how can I verify that? If there was something like that where it's like, okay, your vote counted, no one could see who I voted for, but I would know that it's in the pool with everyone, it would be a little bit more,
Voting is a
trustworthy.
conundrum right
Yeah,
now.
I'm sure there's a lot of ways technology can help there, but also, when it comes to voting, it's not such a bad thing that nobody has like any control of, it'll be good to have a very distributed voting system, right? I
Yeah.
like there's definitely an argument to be made for the old pen and paper way, and then of course there's many issues with that too. Nothing's perfect,
Right.
but yeah, tech can definitely help. The question is just how far should it go?
Yeah. So not everybody gets to be an investor at GM Ventures, and the way that you landed on that job is you worked at GM for 11 years before.
Yeah, something like that, 12 years or so. Yeah, or 11, I
And
can't remember. Yeah.
during that span, you rose to kind of lead the battery and fuel cell division. But take me through your career at GM.
Yeah. So the way that I never dreamed or thought of becoming a venture capitalist. Like it was not in my vocabulary, let alone actually going and doing the job.
You dreamed of being a chemical engineer
Yeah,
as a boy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, now he's investing in artificial intelligence
And I was, I was okay with that,
and
right?
cybersecurity.
And but for me, the way I got to do that work as a venture capitalist is I had the privilege to work with a few startups when I was leading the battery for the Bolt. So I wasn't leading the battery or fuel cell divisions, which are very big in GM, but I was leading for the battery cell for the Bolt.
So you worked on
Right.
the Bolt.
Right.
Yes.
Cool.
And
Yes.
the Bolt was their number one pure EV.
Yes. And even last year it was.
Right.
When they stopped making it. They've stopped making it, but that's the one they're selling more of than any other car that they're making right now. And I think it has, we can go into why, but so when I was working on that battery with our team, I had the privilege of working with some startups, really shoulder to shoulder, put a lot of money to work on the development side with them. And this was my first interaction with, different startup teams. More as like, we got to make this thing. Again, we got to make this thing out of nothing because it's not like you can, as a traditional automotive part, like if you wanted like a steering wheel, right? You generally go to a supplier and like, hey, give me the steering wheel out of the options the steering wheel you got. In batteries, there's nothing like that, especially if you're going to try to make a car that's less than 30K. That was a target, right? That goes 250 miles. You can't even find a car even today. Like, you can find only a few cars that do that even today,
maybe
right?
BYD.
So this was like almost 10 years ago, like 12 years ago. And so the idea was to work with startups to pull forward what people thought was like 5, 6, 8 years later and do it then. And we really tried hard. Some of it was successful, some of it was not. But what worked for me was that I got to work with these startups. I got those to the GM Ventures team at that time, and they asked me to come join them because they saw me working with startups. I had a sense of like I obviously understood technology, which is a lot of our investments were technology based, and then they could just see that startups is where I felt like friendly, like home. Like it was a lot of fun. So that was how I transitioned into being a venture capital from an engineer and from a person sort of working on batteries. But yeah, my career at GM started when straight out of grad school. In fact, even before, I remember one summer I was doing my thesis work with my professor. This is up in Rochester, New York, where I went for.
That's where you got your PhD.
My master's.
Your master's,
yeah.
Okay.
And so he's like in the summer, listen, these guys are putting this fuel cell facility here, and you should go check them out. They're looking for good people to work with, and maybe it'll be good. I'm like, I don't think I want to go do that. I want to finish my work and go get a real job. Like, what am I going to do a summer job for? So anyways, but he persuaded me, thankfully, and I went there and worked that summer there, and it was a beautiful experience in so many different ways. It was a very small team. They had just set that team up. The fuel cell work with GM started in Los Alamos.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Oppenheimer?
Yes, I've seen half of it, not all of it, but Los Alamos obviously has such a strong connection.
Yeah,
Great.
I mean, it just won
Such a
every
strong connection.
Yeah, it won every single award.
I've been wanting to watch it just from my time perspective. I've gotten to half of it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Okay, so Los Alamos.
So that set up this fuel cell facility in Rochester, New York, away from Detroit on purpose because they wanted to develop a new culture of doing research and innovation. And Detroit, you can imagine, in the year 2002, leading up to like 2010, was lagging in innovative culture.
Was it?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, GM went through bankruptcy after the 2009 crash, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And all those years, really, it started in the 70s when the Japanese came in with their cars, with the Honda and the Toyotas. I mean, American car companies had been taking a hit decade after decade after decade, which culminated in the 2000s with the crash. For someone like GM going bankrupt, right? And the government had to come help them. But so in 2002, when they set up this place, when I worked there, it was a small team, maybe 15, 20 people from what I can recall. And then, 4 or 5 years later, we were like 450 people. And it was a really unique culture. It was a local culture. And I only realized much later when I came to Detroit that, gosh, it was kind of like working in a startup without the pain of doing fundraising. Because GM, you still have to fundraise from GM, but let's write a check.
Everybody has to fight for money within the organization.
But you write a check and you just do the work. So we were just doing the work. And the funny thing is, at that time when Tesla got going, battery was a 4-letter word. Not in GM, not just in GM, but in the US. You couldn't walk into DOE's office and say the word battery for electric cars without getting kicked out of the room.
Yeah.
Why? Because, they had just gone through all of this EV1 development.
When was the EV1
It was the late
shuttered?
Shuttered. It was shuttered around mid 2000s. In fact, I drove the EV1 for a whole winter.
Yeah.
One time in Rochester, New York, commuting back and forth between home and work. And it was a great car, but it had only 80 miles.
Yeah.
80 miles.
And on a winter day, like 60 miles. But luckily, my house was 20 miles away. I used to go plug in there. I used to go plug in at work.
Yeah.
But actually, I used to just plug in at work and that'd be fine.
Yeah.
So that just come out of this nickel metal hydride batteries. Lithium ion batteries had just started to show up in Sony cameras in 2002.
Yep.
But in the US, if you try to especially these car companies, if you try to make anything with batteries, you were immediately going to get fired.
Yeah.
And fuel cell was the rage, hydrogen fuel cells, both in DOE, Department of Energy, and really the whole country. Like if you wanted to work in renewable, like clean engine for vehicles, fuel cell was it.
When you think about fuel cell versus battery and that race, it's obviously pretty clear that battery has won today, but you're saying there wasn't always a point where that was clear.
It was very unclear for a long time.
How do you look back and think about the race and why battery might have won when
for sure.
It sounds like fuel cell may have had an early advantage?
Right. Yes. The reason battery won is it comes down to tech. I mean, at the end of the day, right, when fuel cell got steam, lithium ion was doing the rounds in tiny batteries and cameras, just it's kind of when the digital, the iPhone showed up, Kodak was still selling cameras around, it was kind of like that, right? And then lithium ion you took a battery that was yay big in a car EV1 and just shrunk it. And you could put 200 miles, right? Tesla started around the same time.
Yeah.
And when they released the Roadster later on, they could put a healthy amount of miles in the car because because they use lithium ion, not nickel metal hydride, right? But they were the first to see that I can use the stuff that's used in cameras, these standard cells, string them together, put them in a car. Fuel cell, so the cost was driving down much faster.
Right. Okay.
And then also for cars like the kind we drive for our everyday use, batteries actually turns out it's a good use case, right? We all drive them right now. You drive an EV, I drive an EV. We drive them every day. Clearly, lithium ion works for consumers where they're happy with it. With fuel cells, that didn't happen. Cost didn't come out fast enough. It was still too bulky. But the biggest issue with fuel cell is the hydrogen infrastructure. That is the biggest issue.
Which is what right now? Or
nothing.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been nothing for 25, 30. It's always been 5 years away. If you go to if you can, DOE has everything public, right? Their Department of Energy, right? You can go and check their infrastructure plans. And they've tried hard. In Washington, D.C. and California, you'll still find a string of hydrogen stations that they've been put together.
What would hydrogen fuel cells look like if you needed to switch? Is it you fill up with water, or you're just switching a whole fuel cell in your car?
Right. So what you do is to fill up, it's kind of actually, it's pretty neat. If you can get, if it's like a gas station. Okay. You just walk up there, you pick up the handle, you shove it in there. Within 5 minutes, you got full tank.
And you're putting hydrogen in it?
You're putting hydrogen in it that gets compressed Or so it's these cars generally had like a 700 bar, like 700 times more compression than in this room, right?
Wow.
And so you carry these cylinders in the back that are compressed with hydrogen, and they work wonderfully. They've been through safety testing, and in fact, where we may see hydrogen come in are the much larger vehicles, like commercial vehicles,
Like Class 8 trucks or
Class
something
8
like that?
trucks. Like that is a great use case for fuel cells. But even there, somebody has to solve the infrastructure problem.
Yeah.
Because hydrogen, it's not like, with electric, the reason it works is, you bought a Tesla, you could drive it to your garage and plug it in. Can't do that with fuel cells unless someone puts a hydrogen station, at your corner, right? Where you live.
Yeah.
So that was one of the key reasons why even I switched to batteries. There was a moment in time where I was like, I can continue my career in fuel cells. I'd already started doing work in batteries because our lab went from fuel cell lab to electrochemical energy lab, and that's my specialty. I actually ended up being a electrochemical engineer because just working the intersection of chemicals and electric. That's like what I do. And so batteries was a natural fit. And I realized that two things. One, the infrastructure is a problem with fuel cells. And number two, if your goal is to increase the efficiency of the world, to remove CO2 as fast as you can, to remove greenhouse gas emissions, hydrogen ends up still being a really tough choice.
Yeah.
Because even if you were generating hydrogen renewably, so forget the greenhouse gas side, right? But you just look at engine efficiency. You got to take solar energy, convert that to electric. From electric, you got to do electrolysis of water, convert that to hydrogen. Then you got to spend energy, store that hydrogen in a tank. And even before that, you may have to transport it around the country, by the way, through pipelines like natural gas.
Right.
A lot.
And then that shows up in an engine that is about 60% efficient. Okay. So when you do the full analysis of they generally call it well to wheel for gas, but if you say sun to hydrogen, right? Sun to engine for fuel cells, it still ends up being like twice as good as a combustion engine.
Right.
But the battery is like 95%, 90% efficient. Even if you take all the motor losses, the road losses, the transmission losses, it's still 90% efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about 90% versus at the end of the day, like a 30% efficiency, like how can you argue that if the goal is to make things more efficient in our lives, energy included, how can you argue that battery won't win?
Yeah. I just read that electric vehicles in the month of January, there were 1,060,000 electric vehicles that were sold and delivered.
Yeah.
Which is
sold in January alone?
Yeah.
Globally.
Which is now
globally.
16%
That's wild.
of car sales globally is electric vehicle.
Good news for you guys.
Yeah.
We're on the up.
1.6 million globally, right? So but 16 million is the amount of cars we sell in America, give or take, right?
16%.
Yeah, and so 16.
Yeah.
16. I think it'll be less, right? Because the car sold about 100 million in the world.
80 million a year.
Yeah, 80 million a year.
80
right.
million a
Yeah,
year.
so 1.6 million would be a lower number, but then 16%, right?
No.
But
If you did 1 million a month for 12
a month.
A month.
Oh gosh,
so it'd be
that's
12
a good point.
million
Oh, God,
out of 80
yeah.
million.
It's a lot.
Right.
Oh, I missed the month part.
Yeah,
That's true. You're talking
1
about
million
the month.
in January.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I bet a lot of that is in China.
I just wanted to jump over to a different kind of question for you. You're so well versed in so many different areas and you've been so successful. I like to ask people, what sort of life advice they would give to their younger selves typically. But it seems like you, since you were really young, you already knew what you wanted to do. And to the point where you went against your parents, and the family business, you had that conviction to go on your own. What sort of advice would you maybe not give to yourself because you already knew what you wanted? Maybe someone that's watching it and they're a little lost, or what kind of advice would you give to them as a young person growing up?
Yeah. By the way,
aspiring?
I didn't know what I want to do. Chemical engineer is one thing, right? But you don't know what you want to do. And, people always, hard work matters so much, right? But luck also matters, and I've been very lucky. I've been really lucky. And one of the advice I'll give is in the same lines, kind of like be humble. Like humility is a virtue. But humility, sometimes people think that like you're being weak, but humility, there's a quote, humility is not that you think of less of yourself, but you think of yourself less. So, you think about others, you think about making the world a better place, but you can still be very strong and strong-willed, and you can be very confident. So one, be humble. Humility takes you a long way because, you don't have to really worry about yourself so much as what you want to do. That's one. The other one is like what I was saying earlier about being permissionless. Don't take permissions for everything that you want to do.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah, and
pop into an investor room.
Yeah, and you don't even have to ask for forgiveness eventually, because eventually things will work out for you. Because look at the Wright brothers, right?
Just do it.
Yeah, they weren't engineers.
Yeah.
They didn't even go to college. They didn't have a license to fly a plane. Okay, nobody was just be like them. Don't. In fact, I don't know if you know the story, but I heard this in one other podcast, which was referring to a book. I'll have to sort of remind myself. It's in my notes. 100-year anniversary of the Kitty Hawk. Wright brothers flew the plane, right? Very knowledgeable people in the aviation industry tried to rebuild that flight. It failed. Right? What does that teach you? It's like, don't underestimate doing things. Knowledge does not just come from knowing things. You actually have to go and do them. And that is another great advice I wish somebody would have given me, which is, I think follow your passion can work for some people as an advice, but really for most people, what would work is go and do things. And if you do anything 100 times over, you want to paint. You may think your hands shake holding a paintbrush. You paint 100 paintings, you're gonna be pretty good at painting.
You want to hear another really funny story on the Wright brothers? So the first time that they tried to fly, they brought a bunch of media out and they failed. It crashed immediately. The New York Times wrote an article. This is in the biggest newspaper in the world, essentially, wrote an article that said, man will not be able to fly for 1 to 10 million years.
Hilarious.
And look what happened in a decade after that.
7 days later. 7 days later.
I wonder if they recanted the story. They're like, listen, I'm sorry.
No, go look that article up. But look,
it shows you.
On Extraordinary, we like to have extraordinary people. I think that that is definitely you. You came over from India at 22, grew up with nothing, worked at GM Ventures as a partner, and then president of one of the top battery companies in the world. I'm glad you came on the show, buddy.
Thanks, Teague. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Thank you, man.
Thanks.